Hello, what I'm going to share with you is something very important. Whether you are a kid in school or a doctor or a lawyer or still in university as a student, I will share key excerpts from the books The Personal MBA by Josh Kaufman and The Algebra of Wealth by Scott Galloway, and also I will add my own interpretation. These carefully chosen passages will give you the essential hook, so you stay with me from start to finish, gaining a clear, actionable framework for success. If you want more information about my products and my services, you can like my Facebook page and write write to me through Facebook or directly through WhatsApp. I'm selling ebooks. I sell ebooks designed to give you clarity, direction, and real world results. Inside, you won't find fluff or theory for the sake of sounding smart. You will get distilled insights, key ideas, and powerful interpretations drawn from the best in business, medicine, finance, psychology, and even neurobiology and self development. Each ebook is built to help you think sharper, act faster, build real value in your life. I break down complex concepts into clear, actionable frameworks you can actually use. Whether you are starting from zero or leveling up, whether you are in school, in university, you are maybe a medical student or someone starting in business. If you are tired of wasting time and want knowledge that translates into results, this is for you. Simple ideas applied correctly, life changing outcomes. And if you want to support me, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel. More free content is coming for you. Conservation of energy. The fundamental principle of human action is that men seek to gratify their desires with the least exertion. Henry George, author of The Science of Political Economy. Here's a truth of human nature. People are lazy. The critical insight is that being lazy is a feature, not a bug. Think what would happen if one of your ancient ancestors ran around all day for no good reason until they collapsed from exhaustion. If a predator or enemy appeared, they would have no reserves left to respond to the threat. A very bad situation. As a result, we have evolved to avoid expending energy unless absolutely necessary, a habit I call conservation of energy. Over the past several decades, researchers have studied marathoners and ultramarathoners, people who run 50 to 100 miles at a stretch, to learn more about how the body responds to pain. Here's what they found. When you're so tired that it feels like you're about to kick the bucket any second, physiologically you're not even remotely close to dying. The signals your brain is sending to your body are a ruse that serves as a warning, prompting you to keep some energy in reserve, just in case energy is needed later. Unless a reference level is violated, people will conserve energy by not acting. Think of two roommates who have different standards of household cleanliness. To one, the presence of dirty dishes in the sink is a problem. In their mind, any dishes at all is out of control, which prompts action to fix the situation. To the other roommate, the situation might not be out of control until the sink is overflowing, at which point they will expend some energy washing dishes. Different reference levels, different actions. If you think your weight, health, and physique are just fine, you probably won't change your diet or start exercising. If you're comfortable with your social circle and confidence, you probably won't do much to improve your social skills or expand your circle of acquaintances. If you think you are making enough money, you probably won't do much to earn more. Conservation of energy explains why some people stay in dead end jobs for decades, even if they know the position isn't great. If the work is okay, the bills get paid, and the job never becomes stressful or frustrating enough to violate expectations, people won't go out of their way to get a promotion, find another job, or start a new business. People only start to expend efforts if their reference levels are violated in some way. So, if their expectations aren't violated, they just don't act. I began with the chapter Conservation of Energy from the book of Josh Kaufman, The Personal MBA, because the idea that nothing is truly lost, only transformed. We have deeply inherited principles in our DNA. It, it becomes hard to ignore that human behavior follows similar conservation like patterns. We economize effort, preserve psychological energy, and default to built in programs. At the biological level, these are obvious: fight or flight, feed and breed, survival and reproduction, but beneath them operates a quieter, more pervasive set of tendencies I would call the principles of least resistance. Maybe I'm not the only one supposing this. The principles are as follows: something for nothing, more for less, and now rather than later. These are not just habits, they're expressions of a deeper human bias toward immediate gratification, excuse making, projection of blame, and strategic self deception. In a tone reminiscent of M. Scott Peck, this reflects an avoidance of legitimate suffering. Through the lens of Maxwell modes, it ties into self-image distortions that rationalize inaction, and even Richard von Krafft-Ebing might recognize it as the psyche's drift toward lower effort satisfactions. To sharpen the greed principle, it could be phrased more precisely as not what is sufficient, but what is maximally attainable. When mapped onto Carl Jung's four functions, thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition, we see distortion in each. Thinking rationalizes shortcuts, feeling justifies entitlement, sensation craves immediacy, and intuition fantasizes about effortless gain. All of this aligns tightly with Sigmund Freud's pleasure unpleasure principle versus reality principle. The psyche seeks to discharge tension quickly, avoid discomfort, and maximize pleasure with minimal delay. What we call laziness or greed, then, might not be moral failings alone, but systemic tendencies, energy saving strategies, and tendencies, biases of the organism that, left unchecked, shape character, decision making, and ultimately destiny. We continue. Sources of information that change your reference levels are valuable in prompting action. One of the things that prompted me to build courses and offer consulting was the knowledge that some business authors and coaches were able to spend all day learning and helping others and be paid very well for their expertise. That was enough to violate my reference levels about work at the time. If they could get paid for doing what I loved to do, why should I have to spend all day in a day job that was just okay? The more I learned about what people did to make this possible, the more I wanted to do to make it a reality for myself. Before Roger Bannister's record breaking performance in 1954, running a mile in under 4 minutes was considered beyond the physical limitations of the human body. After Bannister proved it was possible, the psychological barrier was broken. By the end of 1957, 16 runners had accomplished the feat. The only thing that changed was the reference level. These athletes knew it was possible and wanted to do it, so they did it. Good books, magazines, blogs, documentaries, and even competitors are valuable if they violate your expectations about what's possible. When you discover that other people are doing something you once considered unrealistic or impossible, it changes your reference levels in a very useful way. All you need to know is that something you want is possible and you will find a way to get it. Guiding structure. In the long run and often in the short run, your willpower will never beat your environment. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits. Let's say you decide to remove refined sugar from your diet. There's overwhelming evidence that it's not good for your health, and you're convinced your quality of life would improve if you can kick the habit. There's just one problem. Sugar taste is good, and you experience cravings that are difficult to resist. How can you make it easier to change your eating habits? One of the most effective strategies is simple. Don't purchase products with refined sugar at the grocery store. Get rid of any food with added sugar in your house and purchase a few healthy snacks that meet your new criteria. If sugar isn't available when and where you experience hunger, and if there are easy alternatives to your typical choices, there's no need to resist temptation. The structure of your immediate environment makes your new behavior automatic. A few minutes of willpower applied to altering the world around you can make it much easier to act in the ways you have decided to act. Now, what I'm going to tell you is pure gold, is diamond, okay? Please listen. Beliefs, habits, self image, and biases form a tightly interlocked system that governs how we perceive and act. In other words, they're the internal architecture of behavior. A belief is not just an idea but a filter that selects what counts as a reality. Habits are beliefs, automated through repetition. Self image is the organizing center that decides what you think is like you, and biases are shortcuts that keep the system efficient so as to conserve mental energy even at the cost of accuracy. When we bring in needs lower and higher, as framed by Abraham Maslow, we see that deficiency needs, security, belonging, basic stability, pushes toward quick closure and certainty, while growth needs, meaning, creativity, self actualization, pull us toward exploration and integration. And listen, this connects directly to B and C cognition. B cognition, being cognition, perceives a reality more holistically and less defensively, whereas C cognition, deficiency cognition, is selective, anxious, and driven by luck. By luck. That is, Why the same situation can look like a threat to one person and an opportunity to another. The distinction echoes Eric Fromm's having versus being modes. In the having mode, identity is built on possession of objects, status, even opinions. So knowledge becomes something to hoard and defend. In the being mode, identity is expressed through activity and experience, so knowledge becomes something to live and transform. However, this entire structure is only visible when we separate reaction from response and movement from actions. Yes, I know you might be very confused. I will explain to you. You will be enlightened. Just listen. A reaction is immediate, automatic, and largely unconscious, an output of habits and biases. For example, water does not respond when you drink it. Right? Look, our response is delayed, integrated, conscious, and responsible, involving evaluation, intention, and choice. Water does not respond when you drink it. It doesn't say, "What are you doing?" Right? It has no model of the situation, no goals, no accountability. Humans do. And that added layer is precisely where responsibility begins. Similarly, movements are mere displacement, muscle contractions without inherent meaning, while actions, however, are movements organized by intention, direction, and goal. And action has a center. Consciousness is what makes a movement action, something directed, goal directed, oriented, centered. The same clarity is needed between attention and interest. Some people they some people they confuse attention with interest. Attention can be involuntary. A loud noise captures it, or voluntary. You force it onto a task. In other words, it is about where your mind is pointed. Interest, by contrast, reflects underlying needs, wants, and values. It is about why your mind wants to go there. This becomes strikingly clear in classic neurological observations. John Hucklings Jackson noted how even a simple act like picking up a small object like a needle requires layered coordination, vision, intention, sequencing. What this means: when you are picking a needle, this is not only a behavior or of your hand or your fingers. It's a behavior of your whole organism, of your eyes, of your back muscles. How the organism is engaged in picking a needle. And the same thing is reflected in the philosophy of Maxwell Maltz, whom recounts Dr. Wiener's demonstration that lifting a pencil is not trivial at all, but a complex orchestration of perception, prediction, and correction. Picking a pen is a very complex thing, and we primarily make it unconsciously. You just say, "I want to pick that pen," and "I want to pick that pencil," and you do it. You don't send a conscious command to each muscle group, to each fiber, to your triceps, then to your biceps until you pick it. You just do it, and in seconds. The point of both examples is the same. What looks simple on the surface is in fact a highly organized response shaped by beliefs, self-image, and learned patterns. However, when the system is dominated by deficiency bias and the having mode, These responses collapse into reactions, fast, efficient, but often misaligned with reality. So, the real task is not just to act, but to upgrade the system that produces action, to shift from reaction to response, from movement to meaningful action, from scattered attention to value driven interest, and from having to being, because that is where clarity, responsibility, and real change begins. Reorganization. Not all those who wander are lost. J.R.R. Tolkien, author of The Lord of the Rings. Whenever a perception violates the system's reference level, action will occur to bring the perception back under control. Sometimes that response is well defined. As we discussed earlier, your body knows what it needs to do to regulate blood glucose, for example. Often, however, you don't know what is wrong or how to fix it. Think of a perception as abstract as job satisfaction. There's a set point in your mind that stands for how happy I should be at work, and your perception of job satisfaction is an average of your actual experiences at work. Pleasant, pleasant experiences move the average higher, and unpleasant experiences move the average lower. If your perception of job satisfaction is lower than you think it should be, your reference level, your brain will kick into action. I'm not as happy as I should be. Something needs to change. Here's the problem. You might not know what that something is. Would you be happier if you changed assignments, worked for a new boss, left the company, or started working for yourself? Who knows? That's where reorganization comes in. Reorganization is a random action that occurs when a reference level is violated, but you don't know what to do to bring the perception back under control. The quarter life or midlife crisis many people experience is a perfect example of reorganization. You don't quite know what to do to eliminate the angst you're feeling, so you start doing things that aren't normal for you, like quitting your job to backpack across Europe or getting a tattoo and buying a motorcycle. Reorganization feels like you're lost, depressed, or crazy. That's normal. Your brain starts spitting out all kinds of off the wall things in an effort to find something to fix the situation. Sometimes, when I'm stressed out, I will start to think that being a janitor sounds appealing. The work's not difficult, you don't have to think so much, and you still get paid. That doesn't mean it's a good idea, but this type of thought process is normal. My brain is just trying out random ideas to bring certain systems back under control. Reorganization is the neurological basis of learning. As we will discuss in pattern matching, our minds are learning machines that associate specific behaviors with specific effects. If your mind hasn't already learned what to do in a certain situation, the best way to solve the problem is to try new things in an effort to gather data. That's what reorganization is for. It's the impulse to consider or try new things to see what works. One of the most important things to understand about reorganization is that it's best not to fight it, even if it's sometimes tempting to try to convince yourself that everything is okay. Resisting or repressing the impulse to try something different shows down your learning. Slows down your learning, sorry. There's nothing odd or abnormal about dark nights of the soul. They're a signal that some perception about your life is out of control and reorganization is required to gather more data about how to fix it. Once you learn how to bring the perception back under control, reorganization stops. When you're feeling lost, take heart. It's just your brain gathering the information it needs to make good decisions. Embracing the impulse to try something new will help you exit reorganization faster than you would otherwise. Now, when Josh Kaufman talks about reorganization, he's pointing to something very practical. When results don't match your goal, you don't just push harder, you change the structure of the system so it produces a different outcome. This lines up almost perfectly with the idea of homeostasis, studied by Walter Kanan and Hans Selye. Organisms constantly adjust to keep internal balance. In other words, behavior is not random, it's an attempt to stabilize something. A wolf pack doesn't hunt because it's motivated in an abstract sense. It reorganizes its movement, roles, and timing so as to restore energy balance after hunger. Lions coordinate in similar ways. Some stalk, some ambush, because the system, the pride, adapts to maintain equilibrium. Even monkeys, like capuchins, show this. When one monkey gets a better reward for the same task, the other might refuse to participate. This is the so called inequity aversion, a built in sense of fair share. Dogs show it too, as observed by Franz de Waal. If one dog keeps getting rewarded and another doesn't, the unrewarded dog eventually stops performing tricks. That is, behavior is not just about stimulus and response, it's about perceived balance and fairness within the system. A simple machine shows the same logic. A thermostat. You set a target temperature and the system constantly compares current state versus desired state, making corrections. That's control, not domination but adjustment. For B.F. Skinner, control means shaping behavior through consequences, where a reward increases the likelihood of an action. Lack of reward or punishment decreases it. However, the key insight is that behavior is guided more effectively by reinforcement than by punishment. A person or animal who is rewarded for correct behavior learns faster and more reliably than one punished for mistakes. Contrast with this is with Ivan Pavlov's famous dogs. They learn to associate a bell with food, salivating automatically. That's conditioning at a basic level, linking signals. But Skinner goes further. Instead of just reacting to signals, the organism learns to operate on the environment to produce results. Now compare that with Edward Thorndike's cat experiment. A cat placed in a puzzle box accidentally presses a lever and escapes. Over time, it learns which action leads to success. This is the law of effect. The important part: the cat doesn't understand the system conceptually, it gradually selects what works and what does not work. In other words, successful outcomes reinforce the behavior that produced them. But then comes Harry Harlow, who complicated the picture. His monkeys preferred soft, comforting surrogate mothers over wire ones that provided food, showing that not all behavior is driven by basic rewards like food. There are deeper needs like comfort, attachment, and emotional security. This connects back to everything earlier. Needs shape perception. Perception shapes behavior, and behavior reorganizes to restore balance. So, when you put it all together, reorganization, Kaufman, is the conscious version of what biology already does automatically: homeostasis. Animals, humans, even simple systems like thermostats all follow the same pattern: detect imbalance, adjust behavior, move toward equilibrium. However, humans have an extra layer. We don't just react, we can redesign the system itself. That's the real leverage. You are not just a creature responding to rewards and punishment. You can choose better structures, better environments, and better feedback loops. And once you do that, behavior stops being a struggle and starts becoming a predictable outcome. Now we jump to The Algebra of Wealth, a simple formula for success by Scott Galloway. And now we start with a very important chapter. Best practices. Get to a city, go to the office. Early in your career, you need training, mentors, and challenges. A virtual presence can't replace surrounding yourself with smart, creative humans building something. The more opportunities to socialize, to socialize, explore your interests, gain mentors and potential mates, and make connections, the better. Like tennis, when you when you rally with someone better than you, you improve. Being in a city forces you to rally with the best. This doesn't have to be New York. Though I don't think New York City is the best place for young people, those in their 20s and 30s, in professional careers, but it should be a place that presents you with these opportunities and competition. The conveniences of work from home pale in comparison to the opportunities, personal and professional, of being in the same space. Experts have probably been predicting the death of cities since the first two-story building. Complexity thrives in large cities, which produce more patients, more research, and are home to more innovative firms. Over 80% of global GDP is generated in cities. GDP, gross domestic product, is the total value of all final goods and services produced within a country over a specific period, usually a year or a garter. In simple terms, it is the size of a country's economy, how much stuff it produces and sells. Also, cities are fun, interesting, and social. You will meet people from backgrounds you have never imagined, with views on life that will change your own. While you are in a city, try new things, put yourself in novel situations. You will learn about your most important subject, yourself. City life can be expensive, but that's okay. Your early career years are important for building economic security, but mostly because that's where you are finding the right career, building the skills to succeed, and forming relationships. As I discuss in the next chapter, the money you save is less important than building your saving muscle, and it's fine to live life while you are unencumbered. Get the cheapest apartment you can stand, don't furnish it, never spend any time in it, and practice saying yes. Get to the office, ideally HQ. The office is where you will build relationships and find mentors. And mentors are the people who become emotionally invested in your success, a key in any organization. When deciding who to promote, it's the person who has the relationship with the decider who will get the nod. Yes, relationships can be formed remotely, but they will be less intimate. Proximity to the office, it is your presence there, is directly correlated to your trajectory. A 2022 survey of C-level executives found that over 40% of them believe that remote employees were less likely to be promoted, and studies confirm it. Conversely, if there are layoffs, those without champions or high profiles will over-index on that list. It's easier to fire people you have only met on video. Is this reality equitable or well designed? Probably not. But your career takes place in the world as it is, not the world as it might be. In sum, while you can, put on a nice shirt and get into the office. Over time, you will develop your skills and your network, so the urban setting and even the physical office will have less to offer. And most of us tend to acquire people, mates, children, dogs, and things, and the cost and limitations of megacities become more burdensome. At some point, the arbitrage flips. You can relocate to a smaller city or a suburb, even a rural area, ideally one with low taxes and great schools, while still maintaining the level of focus your career needs at that stage in your professional life. Desire is table stakes. Whether you are at school, a startup, or a corporation, everyone wants the same things: success, validation, skills, talents, and economic security. And the universe doesn't care. Desire is necessary, not sufficient. Let me repeat that. Desire is necessary, not sufficient. There's a lot of career and life advice about setting goals. Goals are fine, even necessary, and measurable targets can be important management tools in business. Research suggests that the simple act of writing down your goals can have a profound effect on outcomes, but your desire to reach a goal is not going to get you there. First off, progress isn't linear, it's lumpy. People approach me and congratulate me on my overnight success. Not quite. My overnight success took 35 years of hard work and getting back up after I was punched in the face. If your motivation for doing the work is your desire for some end goal, you're setting yourself up for a lot of frustration when you're grinding away and not seeing any progress toward the goal. And the bigger the goal, the longer the time horizon before you can achieve it, the greater the opportunity that your desire will burn out before you get there. Then there's the problem with obtaining your heart's desire. What next? The greater the struggle you have made to get something, the more you have sacrificed for it. The greater your disappointment will be when you win the prize and your life hasn't fundamentally changed, because you will still be you, with all your neuroses and fears and regrets. Only it's worse because you have the thing you wanted so badly. What will motivate you now? It's a familiar line. Life is a journey, not a destination. Or, as habit guru James Clear put it, if you want better results, then forget about setting goals. Focus on your systems instead. Your job is to channel your desire, your ambition, and whatever else motivates you. Fear, incidentally, is an outstanding motivator into building your skills, accumulating credentials and contacts, and working hard, really hard. Find the reward in knowing you did the work, take pride in the improvements and intermediate successes, and the thing you desire will come to pass. Bill Walsh, who coached the San Francisco 49ers to 3 Super Bowl wins and revolutionized the NFL, later put down his management philosophy in a book, the title of which captured his ethos. The score takes care of itself. Grit, talent and desire. Talent and desire matched to the right career are a good start. What turns this into economic security is years of hard work. There's no secret nor shortcut. It takes toil to achieve. Grit is your ability to step up every day and do the work, even when it's not being recognized, when it's not producing results, when you're exhausted or distracted. That's success, just in its gestation phase. The guru of grit, neuroscientist Angela Duckworth, defines the trait as the intersection of passion and perseverance. Her key finding is that this trait factors more into individual success than what our society is so focused on: intelligence. Her measures of grit have been shown to be predictive of success in different environments. For me, hard work typically meant long hours and near total commitment. When I was building L2, I was at the office during the day, home for bath time with the kids, then back to the office. On Sundays, I worked a half day. If a client called and wanted to meet, I would often get on a plane the next day. Not everyone has the privilege or the desire to be that committed. Putting in 110% doesn't guarantee success, and working 90% doesn't foreclose it. You can be focused and succeed even if you don't want to be a business Navy SEAL. Figure out how you can contribute more than the next person. Baseball statisticians have a metric: wins above replacement, that measures how many games a team wins when a star player is in the lineup versus what the stats say they would have won with a run of the mill player at that position. Find a way to increase your wins above a replacement. Cultivating grit is not easy. It's thought to be a product of genetics and early childhood. But the best thinking is that grit flows from a growth mindset, or an appreciation that, as Stephen Kotler puts it, talent is merely a starting point and practice makes all the difference. Consider your own history of learning and improvement. When something that was initially frustrating and difficult became easier through work, through work being the key phrase. If you can't fix it, you have to stand it. All our actions take place against a backdrop of forces outside our control. There are plenty of things we can invest time and energy into that we can truly affect, so don't waste resources fighting battles you can't win. In their book, Designing Your Life, Dave Evans and Bill Burnett define gravity problems as obstacles or contrary forces you can't do anything about. If it's not actionable, they write, it's not a problem, it's a circumstance. When you're in the thick of the struggle, it's easy to mistake advice about persistence, grit, and focus as meaning you should never give up, or worse, that if your head hurts from pounding it against a wall, you must be doing something right. But it's important to step back and consider the landscape. Are you ramming a wall that can be breached? Or are you fighting gravity? There's a saying in the market, you can't fight the Fed. It means that if the Federal Reserve wants the economy to move in a certain direction, only a fool bets against it. Macroeconomic factors are gravity, so unless you're the Fed chair, you likely can't change them. Gravity exists on a smaller scale as well. Unrequited love, unless you're a poet, is a gravity problem. He or she's just not that into you. Move on. If your boss only gives choice assignments and promotions to people who they socialize with, and you've got 3 kids at home and no interest in golf, that sounds like a gravity problem. I left consulting as it's a relationship business, and I sensed I no longer had the discipline or personality to be friend with my clients. There are 2 steps to dealing with gravity. The first is recognizing it. The second is reframing your response so you have a problem you can solve. Gravity doesn't mean we can't climb steep hills or even fly, but the solution to those challenges must work within the reality of gravity, not against it. If you are always chasing after romantic partners or jobs or hobbies that don't return your interest, there's probably a mismatch between your passion and your talent. What do you have to offer? And can you enhance it? And what kind of people want that? You have to know when to quit. Persistence should be a feature, not a suicide pact. When you are fighting your way through the jungle, take out your compass regularly and make sure you're headed in the right direction. This is a situation where your kitchen cabinet is invaluable. Don't quit because it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. Quit because the data, or a mentor you trust, or multiple external signs indicate your time would be better invested somewhere else. There is no shame in this. In 1997, I started an e-commerce company called Red Envelope. It was great until it wasn't, and it took 10 years to finally pull the plug. The worst thing? It failed slowly. Losing the majority of my net worth wasn't fun, but what stung the most was that it took 10 years to fail. 2 years after I founded it, Red Envelope was still promising me wealth and glory, and I started an e-commerce incubator company called Brand Farm, backed by, among others, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. The idea was pretty simple. Have one infrastructure, one legal department, one technology department, one business development department, one office space, and punch out e-commerce companies. I raised $15 million based on a PowerPoint deck. 6 months in, boom, dot bomb implosion. We realized the concept no longer made sense given the economic climate. We shut down the parent business, asked our portfolio companies to cut their burn by 50% to survive the nuclear winter so they could live to fight another day, and we moved on. That was a blessing. Success is the best thing. Failing fast is the next best thing. Anytime you play the odds, quitting should be an option. In tech, we rebrand quitting as pivoting to make it more palatable. Great gamblers are great quitters. Kenny Rogers' signature song reminds us we have to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Poker champion Annie Duke wrote an entire book about quitting. She makes a compelling case. It's one of the keys to success in business and life. One of her tips: plan your out ahead of time so when the emotion of the moment takes over, you've got a signal that you can count on. You've got a signal you can count on. Knowing when to quit is essential. It's an art. How successful people have quit. Some often. Find people you trust who have the backbone and perspective to tell you if when you should hang in there or fold your cards. Peaks and valleys, not a ladder. Career progression is not the steady staircase to the executive floor it once was. Rigid expectations of a linear upward trajectory can blind you to diagonal opportunities. Think of your career not as a ladder to climb, but as a mountain range to cross, with different challenges and environments to master, expanding your toolkit along the way so you can keep moving forward. Focus does not necessarily translate to linear progression. There's value in variety. One study found that the best predictor of a new CEO's success was how many different jobs they had held before taking the reins. Successful, wealth generating employment careers, as opposed to entrepreneurship, typically include strategic job changes that produce jumps in responsibility and compensation. It's a sad truth of human nature that outsiders will value you more than your current employer. We crave novelty, and bosses are no different. It's a common mistake for managers to view the employee through the lens of when the person first joined the firm versus a more seasoned executive who is known commodity. Even if you don't change employers, market checks can pay dividends. My first year at Stern, I was paid $12,000. My value to the school climbed fast. I taught the school's most popular class and I made frequent outside appearances, but my compensation did not. Universities underpay clinical and adjunct faculty to subsidize, too often, unproductive tenured faculty. So every few years I brought them an offer from another university and was transparent. This is what my market value is. I would like to stay and I ask that you match it. They did. Eventually, my other ventures rendered New York my New York University compensation less valuable, see above marginal utility, and these days I return my compensation to Stern so I can bite the hand that doesn't feed me. Let me repeat that. So I can bite the hand that doesn't feed me. I write and speak about the shortcomings of higher education, and it would feel funny to cash their checks as I rage against the machine. But for many years, these races were a big deal for me. In sum, if you want to grow your compensation at a greater clip than inflation, you will likely either need to leave or demonstrate a credible willingness to do so. See above offers from other universities. Be on LinkedIn, maintain your profile, benchmark peers, talk to friends, former classmates, and colleagues about their jobs. There's an incorrect notion that talking about money or promotions is uncouth. Only your employer benefits from your ignorance. If you are in a field where headhunters prowl, take their calls now and then let them buy you lunch and quiz them about the state of the market. Who is hiring? What are they looking for? What skill sets and characteristics are hot right now? Who's struggling to catch on? And most critically, what's your value and where would it be maximized? A caveat: explore other opportunities with a healthy skepticism and actively remind yourself what you like about your current employer. Every job has its frustrations, every boss their irritations, and what seems like a dazzling and limitless opportunity will, after 6 months, likely be just your job. The nuclear option is to take all this information and actually change jobs. As of March 2023, Americans who had changed jobs in the past 12 months increased their compensation 7.7% in that time, while those who had not changed jobs saw an increase of just 5.7%. The delta changes over time, but job switchers are almost always ahead of those they leave behind. New environments also expand your experience base, making you more flexible and adaptable in a changing economy. The image of the job switcher is changing, but overall, job tenures have declined only modestly. In 1983, the median tenure for workers 25 and older was 5.9 years. By 2022, that had declined, but just 17% over nearly 4 decades to 4.9 years. Where job switching has accelerated fastest is with younger workers. 21% of millennials say they have changed jobs within the past year, more than 3 times the number of non millennials who have done the same. Members of Gen Z are switching jobs at a rate 134% higher than they did in 2019, according to LinkedIn data. That compares with 24% more for millennials and 4% less for boomers. And Gen Zers plan to keep moving. 25% say they hope or plan to leave their employers within the next 6 months, compared with 23% of millennials and 18% of Gen Xers. Changing jobs is a double edged sword, however, and one to be wielded with care. It often means abandoning investments you have made in learning about an organization and rebuilding a reputation in a network at the new firm. That's the truth. There's a significant risk because no amount of interviewing can ensure you will be a fit at the new organization. And then there's the cumulative effect on your resume. What message what message your employment history sends to future employers? If you have had 3 jobs in 7 years, the person interviewing you likely assumes you are the problem. You are the problem. Of course, I'm not suggesting you stay at a terrible job solely for CV hygiene. However, if you were at your last job for less than 2 years and you don't love your current job, I would think long and hard about what would be required to stay 3 years plus before switching. Young people who are comfortable with regular changes of employer shouldn't assume everyone feel the same. For a sense of how we used to view frequent job switchers and how some still do, in 1974 a Berkeley psychologist coined the term hobo syndrome. Hobo syndrome to describe the periodic itch to move from a job in one place to some other job in some other place, which he thought was an impulse not unlike that which causes birds to migrate. Hobo syndrome is not a label you want potential employers attaching to your resume. So, when should you change jobs? When the next move gets you further across the terrain, balanced against your reputation as a serial job switcher, meaning when there's a strategic value in the change, that it's materially better, not just different. Are you adding a valuable brand name to your resume? Is it an opportunity to expand your network in a productive way? Most important, will the new position employer allow you to expand your skill set? This can be technical job performance skills like learning new software or analysis tools, but it can also mean softer skills, the opportunity to manage other people, exposure to senior management, better mentors, more direct customer contact. If you can't articulate clear and concrete advantages to the new job, question whether it's just change for change's sake and whether you will be looking around again in another year. Scott Galloway's idea about changing jobs can be expanded into a much broader theory of human adaptation where career shifts are just one expression of a deeper biological and psychological rule. We are constantly adapting systems, trying to survive, grow, and optimize fit with our environment. In other words, what looks like job hopping is actually a modern version of evolution in action, not survival of the strongest, but survival of the fittest or of the most adaptable. So, as in nature, success depends less on raw power and more on flexibility, learning speed, and environmental awareness. This connects to this connects with socialization and different forms of intelligence. For example, instrumental intelligence can be seen in Wolfgang Kohler's chimpanzees, where the ape uses tools like sticks to reach bananas, problem solving through external manipulation of the environment. Secondly, social intelligence, on the other hand, is the ability to navigate groups, status, cooperation, and conflict. And lastly, emotional intelligence is the ability to regulate internal states and understand others, which becomes visible when contrasting a baby and someone like Albert Einstein. The baby might have raw emotional expressivity and immediacy, while Einstein represents highly structured cognition integrated with emotional regulation and abstraction. However, even intelligence is not fully conscious. As described in the clinical observations of Eugene Bleuler, professor and doctor, there is a separation between affectivity and intellect, as processes at both conscious and unconscious levels, meaning emotional drives can influence reasoning without awareness, shaping decisions beneath rational thought. This becomes clearer when we consider control over the body. You can't directly command your heart rate or intestinal movements, yet you can influence them indirectly through exercise, breathing, stress regulation or chemicals. That is, we distinguish between direct and indirect control. So, human control is layered. Some systems are voluntary, walking, speaking, while others are autonomic, heartbeat, digestion, and between them lies a gradient of indirect influence. This maps closely onto psychological theories of the so-called internal and external locus of control. Individuals with an internal locus believe outcomes depend on their actions, while those with an external locus of control attribute outcomes to fate, systems, or others. In other words, implicit assumptions, automatic unconscious beliefs, often drive behavior more than explicit ones, what we consciously declare. So, a person may say they are in control while acting as if they are not. Learning systems reinforce this structure. Declarative learning, facts, concepts, explicit knowledge, builds understanding, while non declarative learning, skills, habits, conditioned responses, builds competence. So, as declarative learning tells you what to do, non declarative learning determines whether you can actually do it under pressure. This directly shapes confidence. Confidence is not belief alone, but the felt evidence of repeated successful action stored in procedural memory. Finally, this can be interpreted through Carl Jung's idea of adaptation, an external as well as internal adaptation is adjusting to the outer or the inner world of yourself. Jobs, roles, environment, or aligning consciousness with unconscious drives, emotions, archetypal patterns, behavioral patterns, and so on. In contrast, thinkers like Robert Moore describe the psyche as structured between archetypal forces, deep universal patterns, and the system self, organized socially constructed identity. Putting it all together, changing jobs is not just economic behavior. It is a surface expression of deeper adaptive processes where intelligence, emotion, learning systems, bodily regulation, and identity structures all interact and overlap in one continuous attempt to maintain balance, expand capacity, and survive in an increasingly complex environment. And we again flip to Josh Kaufman and his personal MBA. The conflict. The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. Albert Einstein, Nobel Prize winning physicist. Let's take a moment to examine everyone's favorite character flaw: procrastination. Everyone procrastinates to a certain extent with too many things to do. Putting off tasks until they feel urgent is a natural response. How can you focus on something due in the future when there's something that needs to be done now? What's particularly frustrating are the times we know we have time to get something done in advance, but we just don't feel like doing it right now. Part of us wants to work, and part of us wants to not work. If you try to force yourself to work, you find that you're so distracted that you don't get much done. If you try to rest, part of you feels bad that you're not working, which means you're not resting. Entire days can pass where you neither really work nor really rest, but you feel exhausted from the effort of getting nothing done. What gives? Conflicts occur when two control systems try to change the same perception. When you are procrastinating, one of your brain's subsystems is trying to control getting things done, while another is trying to control getting enough rest. Since both systems are trying to control the same perception, physical action, the systems fight to move the perception in the direction they want it to go. The situation is akin to a heater and an air conditioner fighting to control the temperature in a single room. As long as their respective reference levels are mutually exclusive, neither system will ever be under control. They will continue to expend effort to move the system in the direction they are controlling for. Even if one system brings the perception back under control temporarily, it won't be long before the other system ensures it's out of control once more. Procrastination is an example of an inner conflict, but conflicts happen between people as well. Conflicts occur when people are controlling for different outputs that require the same input. Think of two children fighting over the same toy. It's the procrastination temperature battle all over again, only the control systems are people. As long as one child has the toy, the other will be upset. As a result, the toy moves back and forth, and both children are upset. Think about senior leaders in a large company squabbling over how a limited budget will be allocated, and you will have a good idea of where conflicts come from. If $1 million is allocated to one vice president, that means all of the other vice presidents can't use it, so they protest. Corporate politics at its best. One of the things that make interpersonal conflicts challenging is that we can never truly control the actions of another human being. We can influence, persuade, inspire, or negotiate, but we can never act upon another person's perceptions or change their reference level in a direct way. Conflicts can only be resolved by changing reference levels. How success is defined by the parties involved. Attempting to resolve a conflict by calling attention to unacceptable behavior is ineffective in the same way that willpower can change behavior in a direct way. It's not addressing the root cause of the conflict. Each party in the conflict has a different reference level, which is primarily influenced by the situation or environment. The only way to resolve the conflict is to change each party's reference level, which is the best done by changing the structure of the situation. In the case of procrastination, conflict can be ended by scheduling firm times for work and rest, ensuring enough of each. In the new habit, Neo Fior recommends creating an schedule that prioritizes rest over work. When your brain is sure that you will be receiving all the relaxation and enjoyment you need, and that you only have a certain amount of time to get things done, it's easier to focus on doing productive work. In the case of the competing heater and air conditioner, the situation can only exist as long as you maintain the conflicting temperatures on the thermostats. Change the reference levels and you resolve the conflict. In the case of squabbling children or vice presidents, you can change the situation by ensuring that each combatant gets roughly the same toy, gets no toy at all, or changes their measure of success from getting mine to working together. Change the situation that creates the reference levels each party is using to measure success, and you will eliminate the conflict. Pattern matching. Your memory is a monster. You forget, it doesn't. It simply files things away. It keeps things for you or hides things from you and summons them to your recall with a will of its own. You think you have a memory, but it has you. John Irving, novelist and Academy Award winning screenwriter. Long before you knew what gravity was, you knew that a ball would move toward the ground if you released it. The first few times you let go of a ball, it would always fall to the ground. It didn't take many such experiences for you to learn that any object you released would fall. Gravity is a name for something your brain learned by itself. One of the most interesting things about the brain is its ability to learn and recognize patterns. Think of Pavlov's famous dogs. Ring a bell and they will start to salivate. Pavlov taught them a pattern. Every time the bell rings, food is on the way. It didn't take long for the dogs to learn the pattern, so they began to respond even before the food appeared. Our brains are natural pattern matching machines. The brain is busy trying to find patterns in what we perceive, then associating new patterns with other patterns that are stored in memory. This pattern matching process happens without conscious effort. By paying attention to the world around you, your brain is collecting new patterns and adding them to memory. Humans learn patterns primarily via experimentation and observation. If a small child wants to be held by its mother, it doesn't take long to try several different approaches and learn which response produces the desired result. If I cry, mom is going to pick me up and hold me. From then on, the child will rely on the pattern whenever it desires the result. You can think of your memory as the database of patterns you have learned via past experiences. Patterns get stored in our long term memory, waiting to be used to determine responses to new or uncommon situations. Recall is optimized for speed, not accuracy. The brain stores information contextually, which helps you recall related patterns when you need them. That's why the best way to find a set of lost keys is to mentally walk through all of the places you have been. The context makes it easier to recall the information. The more accurate patterns you have learned, the more options you have when solving new problems. Pattern matching is one of the primary reasons experienced people tend to make better decisions than inexperienced people. They have learned more accurate patterns via their experience. Having a larger mental database to draw from is what gives experts their expertise. Pattern matching, as well as pattern identification, is one of the foundational capabilities of our mind and how it works. The more accurate patterns you have stored in your memory, the better you can respond to whatever life throws at you. Mental simulation. I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free. Michelangelo, sculptor and artist. Quick. Imagine jumping into the middle of an active volcano. Is it a good idea? Answering this question took you only a few fractions of a second, even if you have never jumped into a volcano or seen anyone who has. What you have done is quite extraordinary. How is it possible to know the answer to a question you have never considered before? Mental simulation is our mind's ability to imagine taking a specific action, then simulate the probable result before acting. Our minds try to predict what will happen in the future based on what's happening around us and what actions we are considering. Anticipating the results of our actions is a significant advantage. It enhances our ability to solve novel problems. Mental simulation relies on our memory, the database of patterns we have learned via perception and experience. When you imagined jumping into a volcano, your brain couldn't find any personal experiences, but it did find relevant associations. Lava is hot, hot things burn. Burns are painful and dangerous. Painful and dangerous things are bad. This set of associations and inferences and conclusions is used to simulate the probable result in the blink of an eye, resulting in a snap judgment. Very bad idea. Mental simulation is powerful and versatile. It can be used to test even the most arbitrary actions without risk. Given any goal or scenario, mental simulation is what your brain uses to connect point A to point B, where point A is where you're now and point B is what you're imagining. The only limitation on what you can simulate is your imagination. For example, how would you go about visiting Antarctica? It's a random question, but when you hold the end result in mind for a few seconds, your brain starts connecting the dots based on the patterns you have learned. I could call a travel agent. Cruises go to Antarctica all the time. I would have to fly to Argentina first. I would have to buy a warm coat, etc., etc. All of this thinking just happens without much effort on your part. It's what your brain is designed to do. This is your servo mechanism, automatism. Mental simulation only works if you supply a point B, even if the action or goal is arbitrary. You can simulate the path to even the most unrealistic and absurd destination you can imagine. Think of using a vehicle GPS system. The system can give you accurate directions, but it won't work unless you enter a destination. That destination can be your best friend's house or someplace random like New Mexico. Either way, unless you supply a goal, the system cannot operate. The same rule applies to mental simulation. No destination, no simulation. Mental simulation is particularly powerful if you learn how to apply it on demand, which we will explore in detail when we discuss thought experiments, interpretation, and reinterpretation. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Anes Nin, author and diarist. In connection with that, I want to say, before I start with the chapter, that there is a very famous, maybe you had heard of it. Um, One author or scientist, I don't know, maybe philosopher, say that we don't only think with our heads, with our brains, we also think with our bodies. And what you see is what you get. What you see is what you believe. So perception is belief. And also, when someone is making a conscious mistake, I mean, when he's repeating something, this is and this hurts you in some way. This is not a mistake. This is a bias, or in other words, uh, it's not a mistake. It's a bias, or it's not a bug. It's a feature. Let me tell you this. Please listen and try to remember what I'm trying to say to you. What is natural in human behavior is not simplicity but contradiction organized into patterns. We are simultaneously rational and irrational, social and selfish, cooperative and competitive, capable of deep care and sudden indifference. In other words, what is typical for humans is not perfection but oscillation. We move between states, depending on pressure, context, memory, and need. Much of what we call normal is simply what a given society agrees to tolerate and repeat often enough until it becomes invisible. In the spirit of Thomas Saz, normal is not a medical fact but a social agreement disguised as science. It is what the majority does without being punished for it. So, as not normal is not necessarily illness, it is deviation from expectation, from cultural convenience, from statistical comfort. That means a person can be labeled abnormal not because they are broken, poor, and so on, but because they do not fit the preferred narrative of their environment. From this perspective, behavior becomes less about truth and more about classification. A man who refuses social games might be called antisocial, while a society that rewards manipulation calls it business. That is, the tension between behavior and interpretation, the act is neutral, the label is political. Political. Natural behavior then includes both conformity and rebellion, both attachment and detachment, both empathy and strategic self interest. This becomes especially visible in love, where we can distinguish conditional and unconditional forms of love. Conditional love says, I love you as long as you meet my expectations. It is structured like a contract. Respect, performance, loyalty, attraction, and when one condition collapses, the emotional bond weakens. For example, a partner who is affectionate only when the other succeeds financially is expressing conditional attachment. A parent who supports a child only when they behave correctly is also operating conditionally, even if they believe it is love. However, unconditional love is not approval of everything, it is continuity of care beyond performance. A mother who cares for a sick or failing child without withdrawing affection is closer to unconditional love. A friend who remains present during failure, not just success, also reflects it. But even unconditional love in humans is rarely pure. It often exists as intention, not perfection, because humans are always influenced by expectation, fatigue, and self protection. So, human nature is not a fixed moral structure, but a shifting field of interpretations. What is called normal is what is tolerated. What is called love is often a mixture of need and generosity, and what is called behavior is always shaped by context more than essence. In that sense, humans are not good or bad by default. We are adaptive systems trying to stabilize emotion, meaning, and survival inside constantly changing social definitions. Interpretation and reinterpretation. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Have you ever received an email from someone that made you very angry, only to find out later that you misunderstood the tone or intent of the message? Your mind reached a conclusion that wasn't true based on what you thought you perceived, only to discover there was a different way of interpreting the message that also made sense. Our minds are always simulating different courses of action, but sometimes there's not enough information to ensure that a perceived pattern is accurate. Since you're not omniscient, your mind never has complete data, so it fills in missing pieces by interpreting what you sense via the patterns you have stored in memory. In the absence of information to the contrary, you jump to conclusions by relying on the interpretation your mind creates. This capacity to fill in the blanks even happens on the physiological level. In our field of vision, we have two complete blind spots: the points where our optic nerves connect to our eyes. We literally cannot see in the spots, but our brains take in all of the surrounding information and fill in the blanks. As a result, we appear to have a solid field of vision, even if it's an illusion created by our brain's ability to interpret information. The human brain relies on prior patterns and information to make interpretations in the absence of information. Think of the spam folder in your email account. It uses a collection of previous spam messages to estimate the probability that any new incoming message is also spam. The messages don't self identify as spam, but the computer spam filter can spot them anyway, using information from past emails as a guide. Your brain does the same thing every time you decide you like someone right after meeting them. Your brain is relying on patterns you have learned via past experiences with other people to make a snap judgment. These snap interpretations can also be altered, a process called reinterpretation. Think of meeting an attractive person who becomes quiet and aloof whenever you're around. At first glance, their behavior might signal to you that they are shy or don't like you very much. If one of your friends tells you that they are interested in you, however, your interpretation of that person's past behavior can change in an instant. Reinterpretation is possible because your memory is impermanent. Our memories aren't like computer disks. Every time we recall a memory, it doesn't resave to the same location in the same state. Every time we recall something, the memory is saved in a different location with a twist. The new memory will include any alterations we have made to it. It's possible to change your beliefs and mental simulations by recalling and reinterpreting past events. Mental simulation and interpretation rely on patterns stored in memory. If you want to change the results of your brain's simulations, the best approach is to alter the mental database of information the simulations are based on. Reinterpretation is how you change the database. In, in Recreate Your Life, Morty Levkoe teaches a process that can be used to reinterpret past events in a simple and useful way. First, identify the undesirable pattern. 2. Name the underlying belief. 3. Identify the source of the belief in memory, including as much sensory detail as possible. 4. Describe possible alternate interpretations of the memory. 5. Realize that your original belief is an interpretation, not reality. 6. Choose to reject the original belief as false. 7. Choose to accept your reinterpretation as true. Here's an example of how I used Levkoe's process. One possible way of interpreting my brand management career at P&G is that I was a miserable failure. I was on the management fast track and I couldn't cut it, so I washed out. For a while, I believed that was true, but that belief didn't serve me very well. When I tried to explore alternate paths, my mind predicted that my failure would extend to my new projects as well. As long as my mind relied on this interpretation to simulate the future, I was stuck in a self defeating cycle. There's another way of interpreting my previous career and P&G. My experience taught me a lot about how large corporations work, and I learned more about what I'm good at, what I don't enjoy doing, and how I want to invest my time. Working at P&G helped me discover a path that didn't work for me, so I stopped following that path and started experimenting with other approaches that better fit my strengths and desires until I found a new career option that worked for me, a major victory and a huge life improvement. Which interpretation is true? Both are valid interpretations. My mind wasn't malfunctioning or dysfunctioning when it created the first interpretation, but that interpretation didn't serve me very well. Reinterpret, Reinterpreting the situation and accepting the second version as true was much more useful. Without it, you probably wouldn't be reading this book. Reinterpret your past and you will enhance your ability to make great things happen in the present. And lastly, motivation. But I don't want to wear soul children everywhere. First of all, before reading this chapter, this is the last chapter by the way, I want to say that there's difference between I want to and I want to, or no, I don't want to, and I don't want to. You know, there's difference in the motivation, in the emotional expression. Motivation is something that you probably think about all the time, using phrases like I'm feeling motivated to get this done, or I'm not feeling very motivated to do this right now. Since so many of us rely on the term to explain our daily experience, it's worthwhile to understand what we are talking about. Motivation is an emotional state that links the parts of our brain that feel with the parts that are responsible for action. Going back to the onion brain as a basic model, motivation is the link between the midbrain, which perceives the world, and the hindbrain, which sends signals to our body to take action. In most cases, motivation is automatic. Our mind perceives a difference between the way things are and the way we want them to be, and the body acts to eliminate the difference. You can break down the experience of motivation into two basic desires: moving toward things that are desirable and moving away from things that aren't. Things that fulfill our core human drives appear desirable, so we experience an impulse to move toward them. Things that appear dangerous, scary, or threatening are undesirable, so we experience an impulse to move away from them. In general, moving away takes priority over moving toward. The reason comes back to caveman syndrome. Running away from a lion takes priority over cooking lunch. Let's say you have an exciting opportunity to start a new business. A feeling of excitement might cause you to move toward that opportunity. At the same time, if the opportunity requires you to leave a high paying job, which feels risky, you might be compelled to move away from the very same opportunity, resulting in conflict. As long as the risk outweighs the excitement, you will hesitate, even if there's very little chance you will ever be in danger if you take the leap. This safety mechanism in our minds, this inhibition, developed for very good reasons. But today, most of the decisions we make don't have life and death consequences. Motivation is an emotion, not a logical, rational activity. It's not like thinking. Just because your forebrain thinks you should be motivated to do something does not mean you will become motivated to do that thing. If only it were that easy, right? Very often, mental simulations, patterns, conflicts, and interpretations hidden in the midbrain can get in the way of making progress toward what we want to accomplish. As long as they are move away from signals being sent, you will have a hard time feeling motivated to move toward what you want. In the same vein, you can't motivate other people by wailing at them to work faster. All the drill sergeant approach accomplishes is making them want to move away from you. They may comply with you temporarily if they perceive some threat to themselves in non compliance, but you can bet that they will move away from working with you at the first available opportunity. Eliminate the inner conflicts that compel you to move away from potential threats, and you will find yourself experiencing a feeling of motivation to move toward what you want. Actually, I uh, this book, The Personal MBA, is the best book. Uh, I can't read it. I can't read the whole book because it's not that legal. But I recommend it to you to buy this book, The Personal MBA of Josh Kaufman. It's the best book you can buy. So I want to tell you something, and I want you to remember it. No one will tell you about this, but I will tell you. A notion is a vague, preverbal mental impression, something felt or loosely recognized, while a concept is that same impression structured into a stable, defined mental unit that can be communicated and reused. In other words, a notion is something is going on, while a concept is this is what is going on and this is how it works. Analysis breaks experience into parts, isolating variables, separating causes, dividing reality into components, while synthesis recombines those parts into a unified understanding so as to rebuild meaning from fragments. The cognitive processes I'm referring to Judgment, evaluating something as true, false, good, bad, and inference, drawing conclusions from evidence, are deeply intertwined. We do not first observe and then logically conclude in a clean sequence. Rather, perception, evaluation, and conclusion constantly overlap, forming a loop where assumptions shape interpretation and interpretation reshapes assumptions. That is why thinking is never purely objective. It is a dynamic system of feedback between what we see and what we already believe. This overlap becomes especially visible in phenomena like deja vu and what some describe as jamais vu, the feeling of unfamiliarity in something known. Deja vu can be understood as a temporary mismatch in memory processing, where familiarity signals activate without proper contextual encoding, creating the illusion that a current moment has already been experienced. However, psychic events such as depersonalization and derealization go further. In depersonalization, the self feels detached, as if observing one's own actions from the outside. In their realization, the external world feels unreal, distant, or artificially constructed. These are not psychological inventions but measurable disruptions in integration between brain networks responsible for emotion, limbic system, self processing, default mode network, and sensory integration. The brain is still functioning, but the unity of experience is temporarily fragmented. To clarify perception errors, an illusion is a distortion of real sensory input. Something is there, but it is misinterpreted. For example, seeing a stick in water as bent. A hallucination, however, is perception without external stimulus, hearing or seeing something that is not present at all. A delusion, on the other hand, is a fixed false belief, like a fixed idea, held despite evidence against it, such as believing one is being monitored without any basis. In other words, illusion equals misreading reality, hallucination equals creating perception without reality, and delusion equals maintaining belief against reality. Biologically, these distinctions matter because the brain is not a passive recorder, it is a predictive system. Neural circuits constantly generate hypotheses about reality and correct them through sensory feedback. When prediction and input align, experience feels stable. When they misalign slightly, we get illusions. When they decouple strongly, hallucinations or dissociative states can emerge. And when interpretation overrides correction, delusional belief structures can form. So, cognition is not linear but layered. Judgment and inference, analysis and synthesis, perception and memory all operate simultaneously in a continuous loop where the brain is not just observing reality, it is actively constructing it. And here is the gift I want to give to you. This is what I want to say to you, that there is something deeply human in all of us that we rarely speak about directly. We are all trying to become someone we can live with, someone we can understand, someone we can forgive. In other words, beneath all our roles, habits, and masks, there is a shared struggle for clarity, direction, and inner stability. We don't just want success, we want coherence. We want our thoughts, emotions, and actions to stop fighting each other and start moving in the same direction. So, as we go through life, we collect ideas, experiences, failures, and insights, not just to know more, but to become more integrated versions of ourselves. And maybe that is the real meaning of growth. Not becoming someone else, but finally becoming aligned with who we already are underneath the noise. If this resonates with you, then we are already connected in the only way that really matters, through recognition, not performance. And I want to tell you the difference between sight and insight. Sight is what the eyes receive from the world: light, form, movement, the visible surface of existence. It belongs to the outer layer of reality, where things are simply seen as they appear. It is immediate, physical, and bound to what is in front of you in the present moment. Insight, however, is what arises when vision turns inward. It's not the act of seeing more, but of understanding deeper. It is when what you see stops being just an object and becomes a meaning, a symbol, a message. In other words, sight belongs to the world of forms, while insight belongs to the world of essence. So, as sight opens the eyes, insight opens awareness. Sight tells you what is there, insight reveals why it matters. One is reception, perception, the other is revelation. That is why two people can look at the same moment. One sees only events while the other perceives a teaching hidden inside them. Sight observes life. Insight recognizes life as something speaking through every experience. And in that sense, sight keeps you in the world, but insight quietly returns you to yourself. Thank you for going so far. I wish that this video will help you somehow to become successful and achieve your goals and your dreams. And I want you to be sure that you're making all you can do and the best you can do. You're giving your maximum and you're striving to the best possible outcome. And don't fear the worst possible outcome, because you know we all we're all gonna die someday. What matters is how you live.